viewers of our Gnosis channel. We hope you are following our Zodiac series, which is nearing its end. We've reached the sign of Aquarius, which is the 11th sign of the Zodiac. And today we're going to try to understand the mind of the Aquarians, since it is a very mental sign, very intellectual, ruled by the element air, and without a doubt, as we talked about in other signs of air, intelligence is the greatest asset of Aquarius that can also become its greatest defect. But as we did in previous videos, we will talk a little bit about the planets that rule the sign of Aquarius. Uranus rules the sign in contemporary astrology, and Saturn rules the sign in classic astrology. These two planets are very different, and that is why sometimes it is so difficult to define the personality of the Aquarian. There are certain defining characteristics, yet in some Aquarians, Saturn will predominate, and in other Aquarians, Uranus will, giving them a particular character. In the video of Capricorn, we already talked about Saturn. This planet means discipline, order, seriousness, and introspection. And Aquarians have that. They like to talk more about important things, the state of society, in short, serious stuff, and some tend to lean towards discipline, to be rigid individuals, systematic and methodical. But in general, we will find more characteristics, perhaps, from the planet Uranus. Also, in previous videos, we tried to see better the constellations from a wider point of view. Aquarius is not only a subject, the constellation is much bigger than that. It represents certain principles and characteristics of creation. And what is it that Aquarius and its planet Uranus rule? Aquarius rules teamwork. It rules group work. Aquarius rules great revolutions. Uranus is an extremely revolutionary planet, and therefore Aquarians are very revolutionary. They possess a force of change. Usually, they are focused on social problems. Usually, they worry about the direction of the world, and usually, they want to change the world. Sometimes I joke saying that every Aquarian is an eternal teenager because he lives in a state of constant rebellion. Uranus is a very strong planet, an electrical planet of sudden transformations, and we will find this as a characteristic of Aquarians. They are restless people, always looking to transform something. Generally, they do not like the old ways of doing things in the same way as they always did. Aquarians have a vision outside of the box. They think outside of the box, and they have new ideas. They have a different way of thinking. And as I said, intelligence is a very strong characteristic. They are usually self-taught, also because the Aquarian's mind is fast and it captures information and has a seriousness to analyze this information. So it is a sign of original ideas, of new ideas. We will find in any area that the Aquarian works that he puts creativity. He will have ideas that other people would not have, because he lives in another world. He lives focused on the future. The Aquarian does not take so much into account the way things have always been. He does not take into account the traditions, like that my grandmother taught me to do it this way, so I should do it this way. Usually a typical Aquarian, because these videos are about the general character, not everybody is the same, but a typical Aquarian will rebel against traditions. He will say, no, wait, why? Why have we done it this way? Explain it to me. He would challenge these conversations and rules of society. So it is very likely that if you are an Aquarian, you have this impulse to be a rebel, this impulse to renew, to innovate, to transform the world somehow, because Aquarius is the opposite sign of Leo. And while Leo focuses on the individual, Leonines have a very strong sense of individuality and charisma. Aquarians focus on the group. They focus on the collective. So it is common for an Aquarian that is in a group with others. We can find an Aquarian behind the scenes. He does not seek to be on stage in the center position. He blends into the group and he wants to work in a team. He feels comfortable in a group. But there we have a paradox. Aquarians like to be in groups. Usually, they have many friends. It is a sociable sign in general. Very sociable and friendly, with some exceptions. But they always try to keep their individuality with the group, in the sense that no matter how well they get along with the people in the group, they will never stop being themselves. And there we have another feature of this sign. It is strong-tempered and with strong will. It is a fixed sign, just like Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio. Aquarius is a fixed sign, which means that when they decide to do something, it is very difficult to remove it from their minds, because it is ruled by the element air, and it is fixed, which represents a fixed idea, that I'm going to do this and no one will stop me. We can turn this into stubbornness. A common Aquarian defect is stubbornness. The difficulty to give in that has to do with pride, like, I'm going to do this my way. Another aspect of the Aquarian pride is that you don't boss me around. We sometimes joke saying that Leo says he will be your boss, and the Aquarian says, no one will be the boss of me. There are two faces that represent the pride that these two signs have. So Aquarians must also learn to be a little more flexible in the sense of listening to advice, because in general it is difficult to advise an Aquarian since they have such a clear vision of the world and of what they want. Another aspect about Uranus that is interesting to analyze is that this planet is a superior octave of Venus. Venus, as we talked about in Libra and Taurus, rules love, sexuality, and Uranus, being the superior octave of Venus, represents the love that goes beyond you and me. It goes beyond personal relationships. It is a universal love that translates itself as altruism. So we will find people who have an ascending sun or moon in Aquarius that have a natural altruism that has to do with what we've talked about, of wanting to help society and others because it represents this universal love, this tolerance. Aquarians generally respect the choice of others, and they value freedom. This is a fundamental word. They need freedom. They value freedom. And generally, if they are of a superior type or more spiritual, they allow the people that they live with to also be free. They would be manifesting this aspect positively. The negative side of this excessive search for freedom is that sometimes the Aquarian ends up being alone because he cannot connect with people in a more affectionate way. We sometimes jokingly hear them say that they don't like people to hug them too much because they feel suffocated, because they have a fear of being imprisoned or trapped. Many Aquarius say that they don't want to get married, and some of them end up marrying while keeping this posture that they don't need anyone. But in fact, Aquarians need to realize that they do need people, and that of being always a revolutionary, to go against people's ideas, or to always revolt with something. This can make them become isolated, which leads to loneliness, and this can be an Aquarian tendency. On the good side, when it's well channeled, it represents independence. Aquarius are usually independent by nature, and they feel good like this. It's the kind of person that goes to the movies by themselves, that goes out alone, that lives alone, because he feels his own company is enough. But every person does need people. So this loneliness should not become isolation, because this can also generate depression, and it can, given that the Aquarian is so original and thinks so differently from others. He can isolate himself in the sense of feeling that he is not part of society, feeling that he is an alien, and that nobody seems to understand him. And in fact, we will always find somebody that understands us. It is just a matter of finding affinities. So for the Aquarians, it is very important that they live together, that they find, mainly for a relationship, people who have a common affinity of ideas. Because Aquarius also rules the friendship. Aquarius is the sign of friendship. So with the person, the wife or husband, boyfriend or girlfriend, they will be eternal friends. They need to have a best friend, the one who is by their side, to feel absolute trust to share everything with that person. And given that the Aquarian has a mind so unique and original with different ideas, once the Aquarian finds someone who understands his mind, they will be extremely loyal to this person, because again, it is a fixed sign. It is not a volatile sign that is always contradicting itself. It's a sign that generally seeks to have codes of ethic. Aquarians have an ideology of life. It's hard to find one who doesn't. Even though it might be a crazy idea, the Aquarian will defend it and has a logical explanation for his madness. And there we get to another aspect of Aquarius, that is the madness of the zodiac. Aquarians have an inner madness that if they channel it well, then it turns into genius, original ideas, quick minds, people who stand out in any area, as people who revolutionize an idea or concept. Throughout history, we find many Aquarian paladins. A paladin is the one who fights for the weak, for justice, for science, for the advance of mankind. And then we arrive at Aquarius' symbology, a person with a bucket and water. As we see in more in-depth Gnostic courses, it has a very deep symbolism. But in today's video, we will focus on the following point of view: the man who drops water in the sign of Aquarius. And that is why the name Aquarius is not the element water, but air. It represents that the mission of the Aquarian is to deliver something to humanity. He came to deliver knowledge, to be altruistic, and to help people. So, this is the positive channeling of the Aquarian impulse. Now, the negative channeling is simply to be against someone who does not respect the rules and ends up being isolated or turning against society. In fact, rules have their place and their function, and not all discipline is bad. And if the Aquarian goes to the extreme of disobedience, he becomes a person who does not fit in, a chaotic person. And Aquarians have to be very careful with this. They must understand the values of rules. Not all rules are beneficial or useful, but some traditions are useful and beneficial. So they will learn to obey the rules and also to revolutionize those rules or situations that have to be revolutionized. And of course, the Aquarian needs to seek to revolutionize themselves when we change ourselves, to not always want to change something outside, but also to direct this impulse of revolution towards the inside. And to finish, speaking of duality, Aquarius and Leo, what can the Aquarians learn from Leonines? Leonines are very affectionate, very loving, and they internalize things. So Leonines connect with whoever is in front. They talk, engage, hug. So this affectionate side is something Aquarians can learn from Leonines. It doesn't mean that all Aquarians are more introverted or less affectionate. Many are more impartial. They like to stay behind the scenes. They analyze things as an observer. And the Leonine throws themselves headlong into things, and he learns to be the center of attention. So Aquarians from time to time need to get used to being the center of attention, to show their talent, to trust more in their charisma, and to not always stay watching from the outside, never on stage, and thus will acquire the positive aspects of Leo. We hope that you've enjoyed our interpretation of the sign of zodiac. Of course, also in relation to the other signs, there are other things that we would like to discuss, maybe in another series. So that's it. We talked a lot today, and we hope it will be useful for Aquarians and for the people that live with them. We ask that you subscribe to our channel and share our videos. Our channel's goal is to bring more knowledge to the people. Thank you very, very much. We will see you next time.